Good morning, everyone, and good morning, dear Gonzalo. Well, today's presentation is entitled Identifying and Mitigating Unconscious Bias by Gonzalo Fortun. I'm going to introduce our presenter. Gonzalo Fortun is an English language programs specialist at the U.S. Embassy in Bolivia. Gonzalo is a PhD candidate in Educational Science and Research Program. He has a master's degree in TESOL from ASU, a master's degree in education, and a higher education teaching diploma from CEPI, USFX, an English and Quechua degree from USFX, a teacher training certificate from the Education Bureau of Department of State of the U.S., and several other specialty courses including ESP, critical thinking, assessment in ELT, advanced writing, gamification, and others. Gonzalo Fortun is an English language programs specialist at the U.S. Embassy in Bolivia. Gonzalo is a PhD candidate in Educational Science and Research Program. He has a master's degree in TESOL. And Gonzalo, welcome, and it's always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much. And the pleasure is actually all mine, and thank you very much, CDA La Paz, for the invite. So here we are once again. This is the second time that CDA has this kind of virtual conferences, and I'm, as I said before, more than delighted. So, shall we start?
Yes. Okay. We will start.
We're gonna be introducing a very interesting topic. Very interesting to me, and I hope that I make it interesting to everyone. It's entitled, as Daniela mentioned before, Identifying and Mitigating Unconscious Bias. So for starters, Daniela is going to be my electronic hands. So there's a short video that I want everybody to pay attention to. It's a mystery. It's a mystery that I want everybody to solve. The diamond mystery. It's a very short video that comes from, you can see the credits there on the screen, from 7-second reels on YouTube. So you may find several of these that you may want to use in your classes. But in this one, I want you to focus specifically on who stole the diamond. That's all I want you to do. Use all the information, all the visual information that you can find to solve the mystery. Who stole the diamond? So Daniela, please, if you could play the video.
Okay, sure. The video is starting. Wow, okay, that was a very interesting video and a very good question to solve. Who stole the diamond? Gonzalo.
Thank you very much. So back to the presentation now. I don't know how many of you actually discovered that mystery. It was the lady, and based on some visual information, which was like where the purse was in the beginning of the story and where the purse was in the end of the story. But I'm very sure that many of us actually didn't focus on the purse. Daniela, did you realize that the purse changed its size?
Actually, no, I didn't pay attention to that part. Yes.
Me neither.
Honestly.
I was actually paying attention on many other clues, such as, the man, who looks suspicious, who looks more like a criminal, who doesn't, So this is something that we do on a daily basis. Today, we are going to explore on a very general way the science of unconscious bias, the dynamics of it, like factors that may cause unconscious bias, ways in which it shows up, in our work or in our class environment, and especially how to mitigate, how to get rid of it, or how to diminish it, you see? So we need to actually start focusing on these two words, unconscious bias. You will listen to this. I mean, you listened from Daniela. You've been listening to me say like unconscious bias like 1,000 times, and I'm very sure that at this moment everybody's thinking, as in, what is unconscious bias? Like, who has it? Who has unconscious bias? Like, why is it so important? Why is it that a person here is coming to talk to us about unconscious bias? And how do I have it? And if I have it, how do I discover my unconscious bias? So we're going to try to understand, and as English teachers, we do this all the time. Like, we don't know something and we try to break it in pieces and to try to scrutinize and to really understand. So you already know what bias means, you see, as a prejudice that goes either in favor or against something, in most cases in favor of something and goes against something else. But when we talk about unconscious bias, we're talking about assumptions that we make about people, about groups of people within society, and assumptions that which we are not automatically aware of. So, conscious or not, actually not being conscious of these assumptions, you see, even if we don't think about them, it really has a very significant impact on people's behavior and reasoning, and this is why we are going to really focus on this. We're going to try to break some myths, and you're going to help me doing this. Although this is not interactive, I want you to work with me. So the first myth is that unconscious bias is nothing more than beliefs that people choose not to tell others. They know how they feel, they just know or should not state those beliefs aloud, so they hide them. People believe that, and it's not true. People believe that there's nothing I can do about unconscious bias because it's natural and everybody has it. It is true, it is natural, but it's false that we cannot do anything about that. Some people believe that unconscious bias is just like stereotyping, and it's not true. Actually, stereotypes, that we all know what stereotypes are maintained by biases in the attributions we make about a person's behavior. When a person behaves in accordance with a stereotype, we actually attribute that behavior to the stereotypical characteristic that they share with other members of the group. So we need to be careful. They are related, but they're not the same. Unconscious bias does not make me a bad person. True. We said it is natural to have unconscious biases. It doesn't make me a bad person. I just need to be careful about that unconscious bias, not to make me act in certain way, which actually can be bad. So, if we try to think about the different biases that we have, cognitive biases are like very important. And it's important for all of us to understand that a cognitive bias happens when we use certain judgment, generally flawed judgment, to make assessments of people or data. For instance, if you have a coin and you toss it, and you have like heads, and then again heads, and then again heads, and heads like 10 times. On the 11th time that we want to toss that, somehow we are expecting it to come in heads again, just because that's what's been happening for like 10 times before. And that happens in everyday life, you see? So our brain sort of starts acting automatically towards that expectation. Now, something that we need to start thinking is that in spite of our best intentions, everyone, you, me, everyone is susceptible to bias in one or more areas. And that makes all of us, consciously or unconsciously, you see, to advantage some people, and of course, if we advantage some people, then we disadvantage others, you see, and that is something that we need to be very careful about. If we don't mitigate that kind of unconscious bias as a worker, as a teacher, as a family member, you see, if we don't mitigate it, then we will see negative consequences. But if we work on mitigating this, then there are several positive impacts, like the ones that you can see on the screen. Like you have improved ability to recruit, at a workplace, to hire, to retain talent, to improve fairness in evaluations and opportunities to praise or promote. Think about you guys, you teachers in class. To improve managerial, employee, teaching, student productivity. Who doesn't want that? To improve decision-making and ability to solve complex problems, improve teamwork, and increase trust. So this is why I decided to talk about unconscious bias and how to mitigate it, because we are understanding that we all have it, but we need to understand that mitigating that will actually have all these positive impacts that we all want. Now, nowadays we talk a lot about discrimination, and it's important to understand the relationship between unconscious bias and discrimination. We need to understand that when we talk about unconscious bias, we are referring to that bias that occurs unknowingly. And that happens when we make assumptions and decisions about people, about groups within society. But if we act on the unconscious biases in ways in which that results in discrimination or harassment, you see, that might actually cause legal liabilities. So then we need to understand unconscious bias may not harm anyone as they are, but if we act on them, then it causes discrimination or harassment. Unconscious bias, it's not illegal. You're not going to go to jail. You're not going to go to trial because you have unconscious biases. But they become dangerous when decisions are based on that, you see? So just to summarize this, unconscious bias is about the way we think, but discrimination is more about what we do when we act on the way we think. So we need to understand how this works, and we need to understand where this is coming from in order to really do something positive here. So you need to understand a little bit about how our brain works. You see, our brain, it's been said that it's more or less like a computer. And if there's a lot of information, too much information to process, then our brain, just like a computer, also has problems. You see, scientists have estimated that we are exposed to about 11 million pieces of information at one given time. But functionally, our brain can only deal with about 40 pieces of information. So we're exposed to 11 million and we can only deal with 40. So what to do with the rest, it's something important. We need to understand that in order to close this information gap, what our brain does is our brain takes mental shortcuts. It makes things more simple. It actually wants to conserve energy and finds, the fastest path, the one that has the least resistance by creating these shortcuts. It's more or less like a prediction machine. Now, these shortcuts, they definitely are helpful because they help save time and they help produce, predictable results or outcome. Research shows that these mental shortcuts, however, many times um, do not yield reliable results. So we need to be careful. Our brain research also shows that has two specific operating systems. Cognition is, and everybody knows this, it's that mental action, or processes that are involved when we acquire knowledge and we try to understand things through thought, experience, and the senses. Cognitive processes, what they do is like they use existing knowledge and they generate new one based on existent knowledge. That's the basis, you see, for constructivism. Now, we need to understand that as a central repository of cognition, the human brain can actually have these two operating systems. We're going to talk about system 2, which is to think slow. And when we think slowly, we really require more effort, than if we just think quickly about things. When we think slowly, then we are using this system for processes that are more conscious and that considers, like whether others represent or not a threat to us. We use system 2, the slow thinking, to rationalize, to explain the logic of the decisions that we make. This is interesting because this system 2, the thinking slowly, is something that nowadays in this world in which time is gold, we don't really find much time to do. You see, what we actually do is to use a lot of system 1, that's like to think and act fast. You see, we want people to really operate almost automatically and with little effort, you see. So both are fine. Both systems are perfectly fine, perfectly natural. We just need to be aware of which system we are working on. Sometimes those immediate reactions that we have might actually cause more problems than solutions. But we need to be aware of this. And this is the basics of what we are talking today. You see, bias is very related to cognition. Bias stems from those shortcuts, the ones that we talked about before, the ones that are established in system 1. Remember, system 1 is the one that makes you act quickly, the one that makes you react quickly. So how is that we can react and act quickly? It's when our brain, it's actually using those shortcuts to save energy, you see, to save time. It happens automatically. And something that we need to understand, and this is like the easiest way to do this, we can definitely mitigate those biases if we consciously engage in more slow thinking. Hey, what I'm telling you now, it goes against what the world is demanding, like our world now demands things to happen fast and to react fast. But there are times in which we should stop, relax, take things easier, and take a little more time to think about this. Now, as we said before, everyone has biases. Everyone does. Having biases, it doesn't say that you're a good or bad person. It just reflects that you're human, because all humans have biases. Now, just because unconscious biases are like natural and they are a natural tendency, it doesn't mean that we are like helpless to combat it. You see? Actually, unwanted unconscious biases can be mitigated. And research has demonstrated the success of various intervention strategies, such as intergroup contact or perspective taking, exposure to counter stereotypical examples, etc., etc. You see, by taking the time to understand your personal unconscious biases, you can definitely begin to mitigate their effects. And this is really important. Really important in workplace, really important in your class, really important in your family, really important in your social circles. It's important everywhere. Now, as we said before, how can we be aware of something that we don't really know what it is or what it looks like, what it smells like? So we're going to try to first talk a little bit about some categories of unconscious biases. For instance, there's this me bias, this is called the self bias. These are unconscious biases that you have about yourself. It just causes you to believe that you are like better than the rest, or better than the average, like superior to others. It is natural and it happens. Then you also have the us bias, which is not so much as in me now, but as in it is us. We are, just to give you an example, we are CBA teachers, and we are much better than XYZ teachers, just because we belong to this institution. You see, it may actually cause you to believe that individuals from your institution, for example, might actually be better than other individuals at performing different tasks. That is a kind of bias, and it's called the us bias. You also have the them bias, which is similar, but as in you are referring to another group. As in, I work at XYZ institution, and I look at CBA La Paz teachers, and I say it's them, like they receive more training than we do. They have this that we don't. They do this that we don't. So they might actually be better. They perform better than we do, etc., etc. That's called the them bias, the out group bias. Professional biases are unconscious biases that arise, from education and training. Like, I'm an engineer, so I understand this much better than anybody else. Or I'm a lawyer, and I can really see this more objectively than anybody else. It actually may cause you to overestimate your abilities on a particular task, just because you believe that because of your training or because of your profession, you are more qualified than others. So we're not saying that any of those categories mentioned, are bad by nature, because they're all natural. It's just that we need to learn how to understand and how to control and how to make them act when they should. Those were categories. Now we're going to be talking about some specific types of unconscious biases. For instance, the attribution biases. This actually is, the attribution biases are the most common form of cognitive bias. This is when you do something well and you tend to think that it's due to your own merit and personality. But when you do something bad, then you believe it's not because of you. It's actually, due to external factors. Like, for example, if you take a test and you score high, then, oh man, I'm good, so I've studied, this is why I scored high. But then if I score low, oh no, it's like the teacher made the test too difficult, or they tested something that they didn't teach me, or something happened that day, it was a person sitting next to me, the one that caused this to happen. You see? I'm very sure that we might be identifying with part, at least, of what I'm talking about. Another type, this is called the affinity bias. It actually occurs when you think or act more favorably toward a person with whom you think you share similarities. You see? For example, I have a very important position at a bank, and I hire lawyers, but I hire lawyers that graduate from XYZ university, because there's where I studied, and I know that it's like excellent. It's like much better than any other university in town. So I think that everyone who graduates from that university might actually be better. You see? Whether that's true or not, you see, we don't really know, because we are not talking about the individuals. We're actually basing our judgment on that affinity. And that is what makes it be an unconscious bias. There's another type that it's called an anchoring bias. It actually occurs when you rely your assumptions or your decisions on a piece of information that you learned before. For instance, I've met this person, I hired this person performed really well, on tasks A and B. So now I'm going to assign him tasks C, D, and E based on the good performance that he showed in tasks A and B. But what makes me think that he will continue performing well based on something that happened before? It's an assumption that we make, and that is called an anchoring bias. Commitment escalation bias. It happens when an individual or group facing increasingly negative outcomes from some decisions or action, nevertheless continues the same behavior rather than altering course. What happens in this case? Like at a work unit, for example, having experienced long-term success by using, say, some particular software to conduct some specific operations, it continues to use that software even though it has a more recent record of malfunction. So I don't take into account those malfunctions. I just base my assumption on that, oh, it's been working like that for a long time. Why change it? You see? So that is what it's called the commitment escalation bias. A confirmation bias. It happens when you make a judgment about another person and subconsciously look for evidence to back up your opinions about him or her. Like, for example, if you believe someone is a poor performer, let's say you're a teacher, and you believe that XY is a slow learner, then I'm prone to interpret otherwise neutral behaviors as being signs of poor performance. You see? As in, I'm looking at this person with these glasses, that do not allow me to see what really is, but I'm filtering what I see based on information that I have. You see? That is called a confirmation bias. Now, conformity bias. This is also called a groupthink. It's mainly caused by group pressure. You see, it can be exacerbated by environments in which team members are not safe to challenge ideas or directives. Like imagine an interview in which you agree with the group's opinion, for example, rather than standing up for yours, which is different. It's the pressure that you feel by a group to make you agree with them and not to really stand up for something that you particularly think. This can actually be more prevalent in like teenagers, for example, you see? So following the crew. The Hallow Effect, it's another one that I consider very, very, very interesting, you see? It's when you believe some qualified to serve as lead negotiator for a trade deal because of their prestigious award related to a writing project, for example, you see? So this is like, it could be unrelated fame. So you see something great in this person and you let that hallow
you see, glow, and that affects all of your opinions about that person. You can actually have the horn effect, which is the opposite. Someone does something bad, and you let that guide your decisions. So you just have that in mind. You just remember that person and relate it to that bad experience that you had with that person, and you let that guide your decisions, you see. Why did we talk so much about like all these different categories and different types of biases? Because of this reason. You later will have access to this presentation. I will tell you how. And I would like you to start reviewing one by one and try to relate the explanations that you see there with your own experiences, with your own daily experiences. You will actually be using your system to do this, you know. You will be reflecting upon your own experiences and relating them to this new type of knowledge that you might be acquiring. If you're able to identify your biases, then you need to understand that they can and may undermine your class or your organization's culture. All these unconscious biases, they may distort your assessment or your evaluation criteria. They may lead you to make poor decisions. They may lead you to poor relationships. They may lead you to nothing that can actually be something that improves you as a person, you as a teacher, you as a professional, or your whole environment. But the point is, who can help me understand whether I have something or not? So I'm going to share with you something that if you want to take a screenshot, you should. You will have access to this later on, I told you. And this is something that's being developed, you know, at Harvard University. And it's called the Implicit Association Test. You have the QR code that you may want to use to access the test directly, or use the link underneath to do it. I would definitely and strongly encourage you, all of you, to take this test. There are several kinds of unconscious bias tests. And why would I invite you to do something like this? Because I consider that it will be very interesting and important for you to improve yourself as a person and as a professional, if you're a teacher, as a teacher, or any other profession, to be aware of your unconscious biases. When you're aware of them, then you may be able to do something to mitigate them. Otherwise, you'll just continue being that person that you are. Not meaning that you're a bad person. It's just that you don't want to improve. Once we realize and we discover that we have all these different types of unconscious bias, then you need to understand this. Recognizing them is essential to identify and address them. Because if you haven't identified them, it will be simply too difficult to do that. When you have identified your unconscious biases, by lessening them, you will definitely create a work or study environment that's more equitable and more inclusive, which is what we want. Employees, workers, students' morale, is highly improved. So, how do we do that? Let's identify it first. Will it take like the 34 minutes of this presentation? No, definitely not. Today, what I did was just to introduce you to this universe of unconscious biases. You will have access to the presentation. You have access, already to that test. And once you have identified that, then you may be able to actually do something. So I will give you some tips on how to mitigate those unconscious biases. I'm going to be using this mnemonic. It's a made-up acronym, ALOFT. ALOFT. And I want you to try to remember that word, ALOFT. And ALOFT actually stands for the steps that would be ideal for you to take in order to mitigate unconscious biases. Again, you need to acknowledge the unconscious biases. You need to recognize the situation in which I may have or not behaved in a biased manner. I need to understand it. Acknowledge. Let go. The only way to let go something is if you start asking yourself, questioning yourself, what am I assuming? Could I be wrong? Why not? I've been doing that all my life. Why would that be wrong? It never caused me any problems. Well, it may not have caused you problems, but it may have caused some results that you were unaware of in your working environment, in your classroom environment. You need to observe. You need to observe now this situation from a different perspective now that you have acknowledged the possibility of the existence of unconscious biases. Based on the observation, try to look at the situation from different perspectives now. Feed yourself with these new experiences. This is playing, with Edward de Bono's thinking hats. Like, I've always done this like this. That was my black hat. Try to wear a different hat now. Try to do things differently. Observe. See the results. Feed yourself with these new results. And finally, take heed. Take heed of your awareness by changing your judgments and actions now that you are more aware of the situation. You see? So, we're reaching the end here. Everyone has biases. Everyone. Whether they have affected us negatively up until now, in many cases, we don't know. So this is why we don't do anything about it. But once we start understanding and identifying them, then we may be able to do something different. Aloft. Acknowledge them. Let them go. Observe the changes by doing something different. Feed yourself with these new experiences and take heed of this awareness. And try to let them influence on your new judgments and actions. Move from system 1, which is thinking fast, acting fast, into system 2. Become Sean's reflective practitioner. Try to take some time, like in the end of your day, to really reflect on what happened that day, so that you understand that there are many things that can actually be changed. As an administrator, as a teacher, as any other kind of worker, as a friend, as part of this institution, in your family, in your social circle, and you see the results. This is what I wanted to share with you today. So I really thank you very much for your attention, and I invite you to download the complete presentation. And in the end of the day, maybe today, maybe tomorrow or Sunday, before we continue with these conferences, to really start reflecting on how much of what it's actually part of what and who you are now. And again, aloft. You see, try to apply that and start seeing the results. Again, this is applied to anyone, not just to teachers, but also to administrators. Again, to you as a father, if you are one, or as a brother or sister, if you happen to be in that situation, or in your close or extended family. So thank you again, and please leave any comments or come to me with questions, or just to continue this conversation whenever you feel like. There you go. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gonzalo. It was really interesting, the topic. I didn't know there were different types of bias. And well, thank you for a lot of tips that we will be using, I guess. We have some comments from the WhatsApp group. Marisela asked, who stole the diamond? It was about the video, right? And she said she thought it was the boy. Mhm. Then, well, another teacher says, well, Teresita says, I guess it was the woman. And Claudia says it was the woman. So they were, I think they paid attention to this really well. Great.
That's very nice.
Then Marisela says that it was a very interesting presentation. Thank you very much. And some people are writing more comments. I'm going to read to you. Well, Erika, well, I'm sorry. Marite, thank you. Great presentation. Erika says it was the woman. Well, she also guessed from the beginning it was the woman. Karen says, excellent presentation. Thank you, Mr. Gonzalo. Erika really liked your presentation. Jimena thinks it was excellent. And well, there are some more teachers writing. Denny thinks it was so nice. Lourdes says, thank you very much. Claudia, it was really good. And well, it was a really new topic, Gonzalo. I didn't know anything about this. I really loved it. I enjoyed it. It was totally new, and now I learned a lot. Thanks to you. Claudia says,
I'm very glad. Yeah, I'm very glad. If you allow me, let me share with the audience that this was also new to me, about a year ago. And because of my line of work, I need to relate to people all over our country, people with different backgrounds, different educational levels, different educational systems, different ways of thinking, and because of the programs that we from the U.S. Embassy sponsor, our English learning programs, the Access, the CHOP, the English Yes, the English Plus, etc., we relate to people with whom we share a lot of similarities, but with whom we might also have a lot of differences. And the idea is to build upon similarities and to actually understand those differences the best way possible. So it's very easy, like to be critical at what you see from your very comfortable posture, but and it's difficult to actually empathize with someone when you are not in that person's shoes, you see. But it's impossible to be in everybody's shoes. So the idea here is that I started thinking about this, and guided, by a couple of supervisors of mine, I took, a course on mitigating unconscious bias. And I thought really, and I started thinking about how much of that was actually part of my daily life that I had no idea. I've been an English teacher for over 25 years, and I've had like thousands of students. And believe it or not, the moment I started thinking about this, many memories started coming back to my mind, Not really regrets, you see, but many of them were regrets about ways in which I reacted based on assumptions that I was making, you see. So this is why I invite everyone, please. You may not have questions at the moment because this is something you need to digest. You really need to understand. But again, there you have the PowerPoint the QR code to the PowerPoint. So download it. Start thinking about it, like read it in detail and come to me with questions, you see? Like these are part of my professional blog, so you may find space there for comments.
Okay, thank you, Gonzalo. Once again, I'm going to read just a few more comments. Actually, as you said, there are many questions because they need to digest it. Yes, we do. Well, Claudia says, would it be useful to have all the personnel take the bias test?
Oh yes, most definitely, most definitely. I would not only advise you as professionals, for example, to take this test, but you will find that there are other tests that are designed for people at different age groups. So start at home, like, I mean, of course, this is all in English, but I'm very sure that you may be able to find some other resources. I haven't looked for them, to be honest, like in Spanish, for instance, if you want to share it at family. But do this as an institution, play with a group of your students who are interested. You cannot make this something to be mandatory, like compulsory in your class. But if you ask like a few students, volunteer colleagues to do this, I think it would be interesting.
Yes, totally. Thank you for answering, Gonzalo. There are more comments. Okay, great presentation. Beatriz says that. Jackie, excellent. Tabitha, what a nice beginning. Delia, it's time to reflect. I do believe it is. Carmen says,
Sure.
thank you, excellent. Erika, it really is. Claudia, we need to improve our organizational climate. Yes. Bea, I really like it. Thank you very much. Carla, thanks. Really interesting presentation. Mayra, excellent presentation. Thank you. Sandra, it was really great. Raquel, what a great presentation. Something different to feed our spirit, improve ourselves, and be better as human beings. That's
very
beautiful.
That's
That's
very
beautiful comment. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fortune. It was a great presentation. Thank you. Luis says, thank you. Great. Rosario, nice presentation. Thank you, Mr. Fortune. Teresita, thank you, Mr. Fortune. Freddy, well, he sent some emojis clapping. Okay. Thank you, Gonzalo. Greetings from Tarija. Those are greetings from Cynthia. Isabel says, great presentation. More claps from Isabel. Juan Jose, one question. Is there any supplementary material related to this topic you can share with us? Please, he says.
To be honest, I would first invite you to review that presentation. Once you go into the blog, then you will find there some supplemental material, like things that you can extend your knowledge based upon, and continue with this. So again, just to wrap up, thank you very much for all those beautiful comments. It was my intention to do something a little bit different, because I do think that nowadays, like during these new educational times, we need to improve. And we need to improve as people, we need to improve as professionals. And one of the best ways to do this is actually to mitigate our unconscious biases. So thank you. Thank you very much. Daniela, you've been a wonderful host. And I'm expecting to interact with you guys. Anyone who's interested in, follow the QR link and we'll be in contact. Thank you. Thank you very much.
We have more thank you messages and greetings from Tarija. Okay, Gonzalo. Thank you. It was really a great beginning for these academic conferences. As I always tell you, it's always a pleasure to have you. Thank you once again. Okay, and claps for you. Thank you for the topic. Okay, well, the attendance form is still open. You can You can fill out your attendance information. And thank you, Gonzalo. See you in the afternoon.
Bye.
Bye
Take
bye.
care. Bye bye.
Okay,
You
bye
guys
bye.
have a great day.
Thanks.